morning. I moved the mic up a little higher. I noticed I wasn't able to be here last Sunday night because of Mom's issue, so I watched the lesson online as I came home. You just put it on your knee and look at it. But I listened to it. And I noticed as Chris turned his head, it fades away. And don't know why that is, but you have to turn it up pretty good to get it all. So I'm assuming I do that same thing. I have a big mouth, and but people tell me they have trouble hearing me. And Jack's machines are in the shop, so I'll try to speak loudly so he can hear as well. It's good to see each one of you here this morning. We had a really good Bible school. The kids really enjoyed it. I've had a lot of comments about it. Teenagers were asking for books they missed so they could take them home and have them for reference. Comments made by the younger kids on what they learned. It's a big effort to do that, particularly 5 nights like we did it, but I think it's worthwhile for what we accomplish. And I know it's a lot more handy if we just do it on one day, but what you can absorb is really limited in that regard. And so thank each and every one of you who helped make it a success. We had really good adult classes. So if you're an adult and you weren't able to be here, you missed out, but there was really good solid material and things that we had not thought about, and the men who taught did a really good job teaching there as well. And so make plans to support the Bible school next year. We don't know what the material will be, but we'll try to find some material just as good as what we had. And the good thing about the material we had, there was plenty of it. You didn't have to scout around to try to fill the hour you were going to teach. And Beth and Chris have agreed to oversee the Bible school next year and get it lined up and get it organized, and they'll do a much better job than I did. Jeff is swamped at work. Of course, he is the deacon over the teaching program, but he was telling me the other night that they've been bought out and that he is doing the job of about 5. And so he is in a difficult place, but it went really well, and thank you for supporting it. We're studying Acts 20, and we'll get to a question down here hopefully today. My plan is to teach through the end of Acts, and then Wesley is going to take over for me and teach the parables while I work on a church history class for the school. I taught this in 2018, and my computer decided to lose most of the stuff I did. And so I have to redo it, which I would have done anyway, but at least I would have had a skeleton to fill back in. And I retired, but I'm still full-time employed. And so finding the time to do all of that, Wesley teaching the Sunday morning class, the parables, will give me a chance to do that. So when we get through Acts, Wesley will take over for a little while. Last week, we were talking about what did they do at Troas that is of major consequence to our understanding of the truth. And of course, Paul and his companions made their way to Troas, and they were there on the first day of the week where they came together with the saints to break bread, and we were talking about that. The saints came together for the purpose of breaking bread from the very beginning. You look at the events that took place in the church. Of course, the church was established on the day of Pentecost, which was a Sunday. Pentecost was 7 weeks plus a day from Passover. Christ rose from the grave on the first day of the week. Justin Martyr, who was one of the early writers and apologists of the truth, wrote that Christians met together on the first day of the week. Disciples began meeting on the first day of the week early on. the church at Troas was meeting on the first day of the week. Contributions were taken on the first day of the week, 1 Corinthians 16, verses 1 and 2. They had come together to break bread, so they took contributions as well. Christians set the first day of the week aside for worship, even though it was a work day in the ancient world. Sunday was actually a work day in the world up until the 1800s, when it was set aside and would be a day of rest because it was when Christians came together. Sunday became known as the Lord's Day. And I've got several passages here that document that. In John 20, verses 1 through 2, of course, the passage deals with the fact Mary Magdalene came to the tomb early, and then Peter came to the tomb. And, of course, they found the tomb empty. Christ had risen from the grave. Mary Magdalene came and told the disciples that she had seen the Lord and that it had spoken these things unto her. That's in John 20, verses 18 through 19. In John 20, verse 26, and after 8 days, again his disciples were within, and Thomas with them, then came to Jesus, the doors being shut, and stood in the midst and said, Peace be unto you. This happened on the first day of the week when they came together. And in Acts 2:1, when the day of Pentecost was fully come, they were all with one accord in one place, first day of the week. Of course, you know the events of that chapter. The Holy Spirit came down on the apostles. They were baptized in the Holy Spirit. They were able to go out and speak to the hundreds of thousands of people that had come to Jerusalem to observe Pentecost and teach the truth. And this is the day that the Lord had told them would come. This is the event that they would participate in, and they were able to go out and teach. And people responded to the truth. Acts 2:37, and they were baptized into Christ. Acts 2:38. And Acts 2:47, God added to the church daily those that were being saved. All these events took place on the first day of the week. Why is that important? There's a pattern. How much confusion is there in the world on what day we should worship? Lots. I remember being at a convention one time where one of the speakers was an Adventist, and from Friday at 6 until Saturday at 6, he was out of socket. And Adventists call themselves Christians. They follow Christ. So where do they get that? They get it from looking to the Old Testament and the law of Moses. Yeah, Eddie?
There's a lot of people, and particularly Catholics, that always refer to Sunday as Christian Sabbath. Other than the fact that we come together, let's go to the Sabbath. I mean, it's just a misnomer.
Well, I agree with you. It is there's a lot of ignorance with regard to the first day of the week, and ignorance about the law and about the Sabbath among common people. People who study the Scriptures on a regular basis should know better, because Sabbath to the Jews was a day of rest. They couldn't do anything. They were allowed to walk a mile, I think. Am I right about that? They couldn't get out and work. They couldn't get up and pick up sticks or do anything, or they would be stoned in the Old Testament. And so it was a very serious time. Sunday's not like that. We were a member of another congregation where one of the members took the other one to task for mowing the preacher's yard on Sunday. And was there anything wrong with that? Right, as long as he attended services. Once again, Sunday was the day of work up until the 19th century. And so we can allow our feelings and our thoughts and our ideas to overtake the truth and take false positions, which generally is what happens with most people. We wonder why people take the positions they do, and a lot of times it's out of ignorance. You see people who are sincere that teach false doctrine, and then you see people that you're pretty well convinced aren't sincere, and teach false doctrine for selfish purposes. But with regard to Sunday and the day of worship, Acts 20, verse 7, we're on the Roman calendar when we're looking at there, and the Romans went midnight to midnight. And so when it speaks of Christ rising on the first day of the week, it wasn't Saturday evening. And there are churches who profess to be Christians that will observe the Lord's Supper on Saturday night. That's not the first day of the week. That is, once again, looking back to the Jewish calendar and the Jewish ways and supporting what they're trying to do there. And so we're going to see this later on in passages, but it's really important that we prepare ourselves and be ready to give an answer for these things. In 1 Corinthians 16, 1 through 2, I already mentioned that Paul directs the Christians to lay by and store on the first day of the week. In Revelation chapter 1, verse 10, I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day and heard behind me a great voice as a trumpet. It was so accepted that the first day of the week was the day of worship that it became known as the Lord's Day. And when John makes this comment here, he's speaking to the event of which he writes the revelation of Jesus Christ. Any comments?
Mike, they do away with Sabbatarians, the way to observe the Sabbath, because they say the ceremonial law was done away with. Then they do away with the penalty if you break it, the death penalty. I've studied with their preachers and members, and I asked them, tell me, how did you observe the Sabbath? They don't know what to say. One told Eddie and I that, well, I could go out in the woods and meditate. Well, you can do that any day of the week. So that won't work. And I asked a Sabbatarian preacher, Bill Strong, and said, Bill, if I partake of the Lord's Supper on the day that the Bible says do it, what day would I do it? He said, well, on the first day of the week. I said, if I give on the day that the Bible says give, what day of the week would I do it? He said, well, on the first day of the week. I said, well, why did you do it on the Sabbath? I need to know why you're doing those things on the Sabbath. And he was honest enough to say, that's just what I've been taught. And I said, well, what does the Bible teach? And he said, well, I need to study it more. And that was good. Now, when you read Exodus 31, the Bible makes it plain that the Sabbath was a sign between God and Israel. Not God and all nations. God and Israel. We never have been under Sabbath law. Gentiles back then were not under Sabbath law unless they became a proselyte.
Right. There are religious groups over on the Parkway that will get together on Saturday night and have the Lord's Supper because of the race traffic on Sunday. Of course, that's back when they had race traffic on Sunday. And their reasoning is, from 6 o'clock forward, they're on the first day. That's false. That is wrong reasoning, because that was the Jewish reckoning of time. And Christ rose under Roman law, and when you read like Acts 20 verse 7, it's the Roman calendar, and there's no question of the fact that all these things were instituted on the first day of the week. Yes? Right, right. A whole new age is ushered in. The prophets said these things are going to take place. Excuse me, Peter quotes Joel in chapter 2 and talks about this new event that was going to come. And they were aware, they knew all these things were coming, they just refused to accept Christ as the Messiah. And too many religious people depend on somebody else to tell them what to think. And I think Robert Taylor is such a great inspiration and example to that very thing, because he went to seminary and studied, and he had questions about passages like Acts 2:38 and Romans 6:1-6, and was told to ignore those. They're problematic. And I don't have to say anything else. The New Testament law tells us what we need to do. We can't cut parts of it out. But that's what they do. And so you get into situations where you need to defend. You need to be prepared, because it's not hard. They're going to come back, but if you've got a solid foundation and you're comfortable about what you believe, you can show them the truth. And that's what we need to do.
I love Amos 8. Listen to what Amos 8 says, beginning with verse 4. Hear this, O ye that swallow up the needy, even to make the poor of the land to fail, saying, now notice the attitude of the ungodly Jews, when will the new moon be gone, that we may sell corn, and the Sabbath, that we may set forth wheat, making the ephod small, and the shekel great, and falsifying the balances by sea. The Jews want to know, when are we going to get out from under this Sabbath, and the new moon, and all this stuff, so we can sell? When are we going to sell? The Lord gives the answer in verse 9. He says, and it shall come to pass in that day, saith the Lord, that I will cause the sun to go down at noon, and I will darken the earth in a clear day. He says, when the sun goes down at noon, the Sabbath is gone. In Luke 23, 44, 45, when Christ was crucified, the sun went down at noon. It was dark. In Colossians 2, 14-16, brings up the new moon and the Sabbath and says they were nailed to the cross.
Right. There's so much you could say about the passage you just read, but certainly what you said fits right in with the lesson. The sorry attitude that the Jews had is represented there as well. Let's get through this old worship so we can get on with life. Was that worship acceptable? No way. We got to check our own. Eddie?
I talked to Robert Taylor a couple times in the last few weeks. Some of the Baptist preachers have come after him a little bit. He got a phone call, he was gone, saying they couldn't believe it. His picture was on their wall. He was their kind of hero, and they couldn't believe what he had done. So he said, I got to call these folks back. I said, well, they preached all their life. One church does another. I don't see what the big deal is to them. But Robert called him back, and he told me, he said, it really went well. Said one man even admitted he needs to study more, so you never know. I told Robert, I said, who knows, you've been called to the kingdom for such a time as this to help move some of the people that's in denominational area into the Lord's church.
Right. We were talking, some of us Friday night, it'd be good if we got together, a Sunday night, and got together and go see them again. We've not set a date or talked about that, but there's always a remnant here till 9:30 or 10, and that discussion was had. I think Kathy and I said something about it Friday. I can't remember. Slept a little bit since then. Number 5. What miracle did Paul do at Troas? He raised Eutychus from the dead. You think about this. I have been guilty of going to sleep in church myself. And my situation was not like Eutychus's. Eutychus had worked all day long, probably, when he came to worship that evening. And he was in the 3rd-story window. And the passage, Acts 27-10, and upon the first day of the week when the disciples came together to break bread, Paul preached unto them, ready to depart on the morrow, and continued his speech until midnight. So Paul may have preached 3 hours here. How many churches would have a crowd if the preacher went on that long? And there were many lights in the upper chamber where they were gathered together. Why do you think they put that in there? It's dark, one. What kind of lights you reckon that was? Or torches. If the lights are there and the torches are burning and you're sitting in the top of the building, what comes off torches? Heat and smoke. What happens to oxygen when you have a lot of fire? Carbon dioxide. Oxygen goes down, carbon dioxide goes up, you get sleepy. The Bible points out here, and there sat in the window a certain young man named Eutychus, being fallen into a deep sleep. And as Paul was long preaching, he sunk down with sleep and fell down from the third loft and was taken up dead. And Paul went down and fell on him, and embracing him said, "Trouble not yourselves, for his life is in him." And so Eutychus went to sleep, deep sleep, and fell out of the window from the third story. And I don't know how tall those buildings were then, but probably 12-foot ceilings or more, so he fell 24 or 30 feet. And not many people survive a fall like that. He may have fallen on his head and broken his neck, who knows. But the Bible points up, he was taken up dead. That means he is dead. And it's amazing to me that religious scholars argue about whether he's dead or not. Holy Spirit said he was dead. And so Paul goes down and embraces him and said, "Trouble not yourselves, for his life is in him." So Paul saves him. He brings him back to life. A companion story to this would be Matthew 9:23 through 27. And when Jesus came into the ruler's house and saw the minstrels and the people making a noise, he said unto them, "Give place, for the maid is not dead, but sleepeth." And they laughed him to scorn. But when the people were put forth, he went in and took her by the hand, and the maid arose. And the fame hereof went abroad into all that land. And when Jesus departed thence, 2 blind men followed him, crying, saying, "Thou Son of David, have mercy on us." Paul went down, I'm sure out of compassion, and took Eutychus up and saved his life. Jesus went into the ruler's house and brought the maid back to life. Both of these were miracles. What effect did they have on the people? Yeah. Of course, in the case of Paul and the church here, they were greatly encouraged, but I guarantee that the people in Troas everywhere knows about Eutychus falling out of the building and Paul bringing him back to life. And so it enhances the Christian's credibility. When they speak, people listen because of what's going on. That was the purpose of miracles. And you see that go on here. I'm sure if nobody found out about it, Paul would have brought Eutychus back to life. Eutychus was there to hear him speak. And Eutychus went to sleep probably with good reasons. I've not had good reasons sometimes when I've gone to sleep, other than not going to bed. But it wasn't because I worked. So I don't sleep anymore. I don't have to worry about that so much. I don't even sleep at church. But I never intentionally went to sleep. I went to sleep one time when I was in school in Knoxville, and I was sitting by this girl, and I had put my head over in my hands because I just could not hold my head up, and I had my elbows on my knees, and I went into a deep sleep, and my elbows flopped, and my head bounced off of the pew in front. She looked at me and she said, "You need to go to bed." That was embarrassing. But those things happen. Number 6. What do we see from Troas that helps us see the family nature of the church?
They stayed together until daybreak. They were together all night.
Yeah. Yeah. Paul preached for 3 hours or so. They were still there. They had concern for Eutychus because Eutychus had fallen and had killed himself. They enjoyed each other's company above in the fellowship of Paul above sleep. Remember, they had to go to work the next morning, and they stayed there till daybreak. And so they put the better things above their own needs and wants. And you see all of that fit into the whole idea of the family nature of church. They took bread together, not the Lord's Supper here. They took nourishment. They ate together. And people look to their family for support and strength if their families are kind of normal, and sometimes families are. But a lot of times when we get in a bad place, it's our families that support us and buck us up and help us get through difficult times. How much better our spiritual family to do that very thing. And so as we go through the week and we go through difficult times, and I know Stephanie had a difficult time this week, coming back into the fellowship and into spiritual family, you gain edification and encouragement, and you get charged up just like a battery to go on through the week. We meet twice on Sunday. We come together on Wednesday for Bible study. There are other things that go on, but just like my phone, which is getting old, if I don't charge it up every night, I won't get to use it all day the next day. And we're a whole lot like that spiritually. We need that charge. We need to get plugged in so that we can get charged up to get through the week. And the fellowship and the encouragement and the teaching that goes on where the church meets is critical. It gives us, it's our safe place. It's our support and encouragement. And it's important.
Mike, it's amazing how that what seems to be a simple statement in the Bible can become so vain. I studied with a denominational preacher, and we got off on mechanical instruments and music. He said, "Wesley, don't y'all have lights in the church building?" "Yeah." "I'll tell you what you do. You show me lights where they have lights. I'll show you the piano." I already knew where it was. And I said, "I don't have to show you the lights." I said, "That's an expedient to help you see the songbook and so forth. I'm telling you, show me the lights, and I will show you the piano." I said, "All right, turn to Acts 20, verse number 8, where it says, 'And there were many lights in the upper chamber.'" I said, "Now there's your lights. Give me the piano." And he didn't know what to say then.
Yeah.
He couldn't find the piano.
It's important when you're going to take a position to be able to support it. And but people do those things. Of course, yes.
I noticed they didn't have Bibles like we do. You was talking about you didn't charge. This was a lot more difficult, them meeting and having an assembly, than our meeting and having an assembly. We've all got Bibles at home. We got some. This sometimes the easier it becomes, the more lax we become. The more difficult it becomes, the more we strive to get what we need. And I think here we don't realize sometimes they didn't have easy travel like we do. Neither did they have Bibles like we got. And so for them to do this, and certainly they wanted to grasp every word because they're talking to an apostle. And so they're going to need this for nourishment spiritually. And I think sometimes we take advantage of having too much opportunity. We don't really take advantage of it at all in the right way.
Right. And your point reminded me of something I was going to say when I got up here. We're getting ready to send the Kenya work money, do it by PayPal probably tomorrow or Tuesday. They requested help on Bibles and songbooks. They can buy a Messiah language songbook for $4. They can buy a Messiah Bible for $5. And I told him we would send more money, and Kim and I are sending money. And so if you want to add to either, just let that be known, and we'll send that out with this. He has got a big group of Messiah New that he is working with, and things are really going well there. And Howard mentioned it this morning, but it's something we need to mention often and keep in our prayers. It is amazing to talk to him, and I talk to him about every week, how much all of his language talks about praying for us. And his spirituality, of course, it's a different part of the world and a different man, but he's not American, that's for sure. He speaks to their prayers and their blessings from God for us. And we need to keep that work in our prayers, in our mind, and good things are going on there. And I'm excited, and I know you are, to be part of it. but I meant to mention that earlier.
How far is it, you said he lives from the building?
He lives 20 miles from the building. He runs it most of the time, him and his wife both. He's got a bike, though, now because of our support. Yeah.
I'd hate for me and Kay to try to walk from my house to here.
We're going to see in a minute, Paul walks to Asos instead of taking the boat, 20 miles. A few years ago, we walked from the top of Iron Mountain in Shady Valley to Damascus. It's 14.6 miles, and I walked it in 6 hours and 15 minutes. And my knees were hurting so bad when I came off the mountain, I had tears in my eyes when I got down to Depot Street. Paul walks 20 miles just to avoid riding the ship. I might have done that too. But one of the things that preachers don't do generally today is get enough exercise. They didn't have to talk about it then. They walked everywhere. And that's not mentioned. Paul talks about races and stuff like that. He doesn't mention exercise. But he walks 20 miles instead of riding. How many of us would have done that? None of us. It's a different time, and they were in super condition. You look at the beatings and all the things they took and survived it. We probably wouldn't. Acts 2:46, and they continued daily with one accord in the temple and breaking bread from house to house. Did eat their meat with gladness and singleness of heart. The attitude that the early Christians had when they came together, they loved each other, they wanted fellowship with each other, they spent time together, they grew together. We are hopefully going to have a breakfast on June the 19th, and take advantage of it. That has been really good. Jeff Heaton, I think, is speaking at this one. We had talked about having it this coming Saturday, but there's a wedding here this coming Saturday. So we are looking at the 19th. Keep that in mind. As I was looking at passages to support what I was saying here, I came across Psalm 86, 11 through 12. And I read it and I thought, it's not a real good fit, but it is. The psalmist says, "Teach me thy way, O Lord, I will walk in thy truth. Unite my heart to fear thy name. I will praise thee, O Lord my God, with all my heart, and I will glorify thy name forevermore." Eddie pointed out a while ago that the early church didn't have the Bibles and the things that they could look to for reference to learn. But coming together in fellowship, you get teaching. And you look at the attitude the psalmist had, it helps us have that attitude when we come together and spend time together and get the edification and the exhortation that comes from it. So all these things are important. Romans 12, 8 through 10, "Or he that exhorteth on exhortation, he that giveth, let him do it with simplicity. He that ruleth with diligence. He that showeth mercy with cheerfulness. Let love be without dissimulation. Abhor that which is evil, cleave to that which is good. Be kindly affectioned one to another with brotherly love, in honor, preferring one another." I told Rob Perry the other night, I said, I love being here. And I truly do. Each and every one of you are an encouragement. And I get charged up big time when I'm here. And all of us ought to get charged up big time when we're here. And the growth, the good things that have gone on here and continue to go on are exciting. And each and every one of you have had a big part in that. Number 7, how did Paul go to Asos? He walked. Asos was a seaport south of Troas. Getting there required sailing around a promontory, which is just a jut. I was looking at the map this morning on the word promontory, and he decided rather than sail around that, which by the way had to go back west, and a lot of times the winds were going the opposite direction, he decided he'd walk and meet them there. It was a 20-mile walk. He caught the ship at Mytilene and headed for Molitas. They stopped at Samos, and the word there means mountain, and Samos was a mountainous island, and they probably spent the night there. They went to Molitas, which had a Jewish population, that is documented by archaeological findings, and Paul probably stayed there for a few days. In Acts 20:13 through 16, and he went before the ship and sailed into Asos, there intending to take him Paul, for so had he appointed, minding himself to go afoot. And when he met with us at Asos, we took him in, and came to Mytilene, and we sailed thence, and came the next day over against CoC. And the next day we arrived at Samos, and tarried at Trogyllium, and the next day we came to Molitas. For Paul had determined to sail by Ephesus, because he would not spend the time in Asia. For he hasted, if it were possible, to be at Jerusalem the day of Pentecost. The desire of Paul to be at Jerusalem on the day of Pentecost, I have a question for that will be next week. But Paul was motivated to be there. If he went to Ephesus, and it says here he desired to see the Ephesians, is a 60-mile round trip. And so that meant a 3 or 4 day trip anyway, where he could have them come to him and go on. And so that's what took place. Number 8, who did Paul meet with at Molitas and why? He met with the elders of the church. He encouraged and exhorted them to be watchful of the flock and keep the faith. We're going to talk about that in a lot more detail. But he asked them to meet him there, as I said, in the interest of time. And if he had taken the trip to Ephesus, it would have thrown off his plan to be in Jerusalem on the day of Pentecost. Don't really have time to get into the next question. Yes, sir.
One of the things we'll learn from this point onward to the next chapter, what the Ephesians did. They heard, believed, repented, confessed, were baptized, and showed their deeds to remain faithful. Well, a lot of people just read Ephesians 2:8-9, by grace are you saved through faith, that not of yourselves, is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. And assume all they did was just believe. Well, if you read Acts 18, 19, and 20, especially 19 and 20, 18 and 19 rather, and 20, you get the whole scheme of what they did, and it says they heard, believed, repented, confessed, were baptized. So that's how they were saved, by grace through faith in Ephesians 2:8-9.
Good point. Acts is the framework of the church, and the letters just fill in gaps, and that's a good point. Thanks for your attention.